5 Live Formula One.
The final third section of the 2025 F1 season is about to get underway at the challenging Baku circuit in Azerbaijan. Welcome to Radio 5 Sports Extra with me, Ben Edwards, as the first practice session is about to get underway on the 3.7 mile, 20 turn, anti-clockwise street circuit with some of the tightest corners on the calendar, but also one of the longest straights leading to very high speeds. Alongside me, F1 journalist Rebecca Clancy and Andrew Benson, F1 correspondent for BBC Sport. This venue is on the boundary of Western Asia and Eastern Europe, and we've seen some fascinating races here since it all began in 2016. Beck, what are your thoughts on this venue?
It's a really fascinating place to go to. It's probably not somewhere I would have gone without doing this job. I remember the first time I went there, I went for a real explore into the old town, up to the Flames. It's a bit confused in places because you have the kind of Parisian street lamps, and then you have the Hackney carriages as your taxis, and then you have these beautiful old buildings. And then dumped right in the middle of the city is this street circuit. And as you say, it's incredibly long. If you've ever run this track, it's not actually that fun at the end of that really long straight. It's also incredibly hilly, which I don't think you really get a sense of when you're watching it on TV, particularly through that castle section where you go through that really narrow gap, that 7.6 metres at its narrowest point. And then you go up and it's a lot of elevation gain, and then it's quite undulating through there, and then you come back down and then you hit the straight towards the finish. So I find it really fascinating. And actually, just before we came on air, I was laughing at Benny because I was listening to the pod on my way to the comms box, and I was saying I found you and Jolyon were both asked how you felt about Baku, and they said, oh, we're indifferent. And then they went on to reel off all these great races and great incidents that we've had here. For some reason, I mean, not for some reason, there's like a huge straight and big braking points. There is really, really good racing here. So I've always really enjoyed it.
Absolutely right, I agree. Andrew, we have seen these remarkable things with Charles Leclerc getting the last 4 pole positions in a row, and he still hasn't won this race. And Red Bull, they've won this race 4 times, but they've never had pole. It's a funny mix, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, on the subject of Leclerc, he's just absolutely brilliant around here. I mean, he's just good at street circuits generally. He's got a similarly fantastic record at Monaco, and I think one of his greatest laps ever was at Singapore in 2019. Just sensational. It was at least the equal of Hamilton's pole at Singapore the year before. But he's really, really good around here. There's something about his ability to dance the car on the edge of adhesion with a sharp front end without losing control. It just really plays to his strengths. People look at that record of his and they say, oh, he's a great qualifier, but he's not that good a racer. That's just not fair. It's not reflective of reality. Reality is that the cars he's had aren't good enough to win the races, basically, but he's put them on pole because of his talent. He's sort of overachieved in his car, if you like, in qualifying. So I don't think I can see him in the mix for pole again this year, even though Ferrari are having a very difficult season. I don't think he'll win the race for exactly that reason. And just to give an example of what I'm talking about, in 2021 the Ferrari was nowhere near competitive at all throughout the rest of the season, and yet somehow he stuck it on pole here. Just remarkable. Red Bull, that's just reflective of Red Bull's competitive position, I think, more than anything else over the last few years. Ironically, it's not a track that Max Verstappen particularly enjoys. He's not a street circuit fan. He likes long, flowing, fast road courses. And actually, 2 of those wins were done by Sergio Perez. It was one of the few races where Perez could match Verstappen over the last few years. I don't see Yuki Tsunoda doing that. But yeah, so... But it's interesting. I think one of the big questions about the weekend, which are waiting to be answered, is whether that win from Verstappen in Monza 2 weeks ago was a one-off, or whether it was reflective of them finding something in the car. Yeah. Verstappen was quite pointedly, I thought, talking after the race about how Laurent Mekies, the new team principal, has helped them sort of focus down a little bit more on the way they're approaching weekends, without sort of flip-flopping, if you like, from setup to setup as they were doing before. If they've achieved a setup that works for him at Monza, there's no reason why it can't work for him at Baku, even if it's not his favourite track.
Absolutely. We're about to see the cars head out. We're just a few seconds away from free practice 1 getting underway. Air temperature 25 degrees, track temperature 32 degrees. So it's a good day, dry. There's never been a wet race here at Baku, interestingly enough, and they will be out on the dry track. There've been a few resurfaces around the track, so they've got to get a feel for that. It won't make a huge difference. There are no actual differences to the layout of the circuit. It is the same layout as it has always been, but they're just, as I say, a bit of resurfacing, so that will give them an idea as to how get a feel. And there's some wonderful views, as you said, Beck, of this, the classic side of this Baku circuit, but also the modern side as well. It is the capital, of course, of Azerbaijan, and as Formula One moves away from Europe, it's quite fun that it's right on the edge of Europe and Asia, and then of course it's travelling all over the world going into this last part. And so much of our interest is in the battle, of course, between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. And Oscar did win this race last year. He was the one that beat Charles Leclerc with a brilliant move. I wonder how it's going to go this weekend.
We are now in the business end of the season, aren't we? As you said earlier, the final third, and it really is now crunch time. Piastri has a 31-point lead in the championship over his teammate Norris. Norris has never traditionally gone well here, but that's a slightly unfair statement in terms of this is the first year we're really seeing the McLaren being so competitive and on top. And I think with Piastri last year, he'll be coming into this race with taking away Monza, and I'm sure we'll come to talk about that, but he'll be coming into this race knowing how superb he was last year, and that was his second career win at that point, so it really buoyed him anyway. But he knows how to race here. This is a very good track for racing. It's a street track, but it just allows for so much competition between the drivers, and as I said earlier, so much incident, and it's really for those who are brave and can take those moves and see the gaps. And yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating this weekend between those two.
I agree. The sound you're listening to, interestingly, is Franco Colapinto out in the Alpine. He had a good race here last year when it's only his second ever Grand Prix. He raced for Williams, qualified 8th, finished 8th, actually out-qualified his teammate Alex Albon, although Albon did have a bit of an issue with the car. But it was an impressive weekend. He's had a bit more of a difficult season so far. Yeah,
it was the weekend actually that probably got Colapinto's name in lights, if you like, and sort of got everybody buzzing about him. I actually thought that people weren't really, again, looking at the reality so much. Yes, he did out-qualify Albon, as you said, Ben, and as you said, it was basically because Albon had a problem. They left the sort of cooling fans or one of them in the car when they sent him out of the pits, so he didn't get a final qualifying run. Even so, it was only his second race, I think, wasn't it? So yeah, still a good job. But then he kind of had. The end of the season didn't go so well for Colapinto at Williams. He had 3 big crashes, 2 in Brazil on one weekend in the wet, and then 1 in Las Vegas, which both dented his confidence and his reputation a bit. And Alpine did sign him in the end, and then they did replace Jack Doohan with him after 6 races this year, but he's not really excelled, although he's shown signs in the last few races of stepping up to the plate a bit more. That's a terrible cliche, isn't it? I think he's out-qualified Gasly twice in the last 3 races, so that does show a step forward. But we're not quite sure what's going to happen with that seat for 2026. There's lots of drivers in the mix, none of them particularly enticing options, I don't think, particularly for the team.
Ouch.
It is interesting though, isn't it? And it's fun to be talking about driving. We always get to this stage, into the final third of the season where we're talking about drivers for the next year. You're listening into all the cars heading out on the track. No major times developed yet, of course, because they're still getting a little bit of a feel. We're watching the McLarens out there, Oscar Piastri's out there. We're listening to Lando Norris a moment ago. But talking about where, Alpine, as you say, that's one of the questions as to whether Colapinto will still be with Pierre Gasly, because Gasly is very much confirmed for the future. The other one that people are talking about, and you've been writing about already, Andrew, is what Red Bull are up to, because although it's not being... Let's listen to Norris.
And Lando, we're going to need to box this lap, or we'll just be stopping on the marks to remove something.
So that was a comment to Lando Norris. So it's Red Bull that we know a bit more about now, don't we?
Well, it's looked like this for a while now, I have to be honest, but it's looking more and more certain that Isaac Hadjar, I should say in French, is going to replace Yuki Tsunoda in that team alongside Max Verstappen next year. I have to say that back in Canada, I was chatting to Helmut Marko, the Red Bull motorsport advisor, who he basically decides the driver line effectively. And I said, well, it's pretty obvious what you're going to do, Helmut. You're going to ditch Tsunoda and you're going to bring Hadjar into the second Red Bull seat, and you're going to bring Lindblad into the Racing Bulls team. You've got a decision to make about Liam Lawson. And he sort of didn't say anything, but looked at me and smiled. And so, and lo and behold, it looks very much like Hadjar is in pole position for that seat now, even if they're not officially confirming it.
But why would they bother to make any announcement now? Because every driver that they are talking about to fill the seats, it's within their own stable. Laurent Mekies has just come in. He has a very different approach to Christian Horner. You spoke about it earlier about different approaches to weekends. They're talking about listening to driver feedback more and not being so reliant on the data and the simulations. So do you have to give Tsunoda more of a chance under Mekies and see if he can progress and turn it around? Or why would you make the decision on Hadjar now? Hadjar was really interesting in the press conference. He said, I have an idea about where I'll be racing next year, leaning into the rumours. But I think they would be foolish to make a decision now.
Well, they've said that they're not going to make a decision now, and they certainly haven't confirmed anything. But it's the mood music, it's the direction of travel, if you like, and that's very much what it's looked like for quite a while. I mean, look, you know as well as I do, Beck, that they've never really been convinced by Yuki Tsunoda at Red Bull. He kind of ended up in that seat this year by default. They chose Liam Lawson over him at the beginning of the year, which tells you everything about what they thought about Tsunoda over the previous.
Gave him a whopping 2 races to prove himself.
Exactly, and then sort of reversed that decision and went for Tsunoda. But Tsunoda, he just hasn't done enough in the second Red Bull, and of course, if we could end up in this long conversation that we've had many times.
No one does.
Here's Piastri.
Recharge on, back off. Recharge on, back off. Avoid full load, keep low revs. Avoid full load, keep low revs.
Yeah, so I think Red Bull's philosophy is quite simple. They're looking for the next great driver. Okay, they've already got probably the greatest driver in Max Verstappen, but they don't have much patience for people who prove to them they're not good enough to be at the very top level. And I think I certainly would agree with them that it's pretty clear to me and to them that after 5 years in Formula One, Yuki Tsunoda has definitely not proved he's at the top level and never will be. So get rid of him. Try someone else. That's Helmut Marko's philosophy.
I have to tell you, Tsunoda's second fastest at the moment, but it's early times in FP1. Max Verstappen is currently fastest with the early lap, but we're seeing a lot of changes. And actually, something about this track is that it cleans up. We even see this in qualifying. If you don't get out in the second part of Q1, we're actually on board. You're listening to Lando Norris. He's just come into the pits. And we're just having a little look back. That was actually a moment ago. Sorry, yes, he was just in the pits a moment ago. Lando last year was a bit unfortunate because his first run in Q1, there was a little error, and so it wasn't a great lap. And then he went out for his second run to get out of Q1, and there was a yellow flag. He had to back off, and he ended up out in Q1. And the track does get quicker even through a qualifying session, so we'll see the times improve. And funnily enough, he's just set the fastest first sector of anybody.
And also Alex Albon, just on the radio, for some reason they didn't play it, saying he's lost his left wing mirror, so he can't see behind him. So somewhere on the track they're going to have to clean that up, so potentially a BSC maybe, or might have to red flag it depending on where it is.
Norris going through the very tight section, one of the narrowest corners on all Formula One, but now he's coming down to one of the great challenging parts of turn 15, where they're absolutely flat out. He's doing 170, 180 miles an hour and then braking. You go right out to the wall. The number of times we've seen people hit the wall on the exit of turn 15, he was so close, but that is one of the margins here at Baku. Listen to Russell.
Smell a bit of burn, and I think it's the brakes.
George Russell just reporting to the team there, a bit of a strange smell. George wasn't feeling too well yesterday and avoided the media side, but he's out in the car today, which is good. Hulkenberg has just gone fastest, interestingly. Nico Hulkenberg, a 1:45.2, but I think we'll see Norris, yes, go even faster by nearly a second. He's fastest in the first and second sectors, and Lando Norris has just set the pace. We're just looking at a replay of Alex Albon. Let's just see if there was a problem. Or are we seeing something there, Andrew?
Yeah, he was. So the radio message that you mentioned, Ben, was Albon talking about he'd lost his left mirror. Yeah. That was the video there was showing us him losing his left mirror. It's not the whole body of the mirror, it's just the lens. So that's fallen out, the glass in the lens. It's actually probably not glass, is it? I think it's plastic that they use, some kind of plastic that they use. That's fallen off the mirror. So not a major issue in terms of debris.
Not as quite as we expected. Although maybe a puncture waiting to happen if it's in the wrong place.
Could be, yeah, exactly. We've got Verstappen coming out the last corner, starting a lap. I was going to say earlier, actually, Ben, Beck was talking about racing. What a great race track this is for action and stuff. Or
I don't think I used the word great.
Great, no. Or how there can be good action here at Baku. And of course, Piastri's overtake to win the race last year is a really good example of that. But I think it's Piastri's racing instinct and his racing skills that have, well, it's one of the many things that have impressed so strongly about him this year. Okay, he's also ahead of Norris in qualifying, 12.7 on merit, by nearly a tenth of a second on average. He's ahead on points, slightly skewed by the engine failure, you could argue, in the Dutch Grand Prix for Norris, but you could also argue that Piastri was unlucky not to win a couple of the races before Holland, so that maybe the points gap should have been 30 already by that point. But it's those racing things that he's done where he's been so clinical, so decisive, so clean. And we saw a really good example, I thought, in Monza 2 weeks ago on the first lap, where it was a bit messy for a while out of the first chicane and the second chicane, but then he overtook Charles Leclerc with a move I think I've never seen before in Formula One, around the outside of the first Lesmo on the first lap. It was just it almost didn't get mentioned or noticed at the time. And he wasn't that quick over the weekend, as he admits himself, but that move is just a great example of one of the great skills that Piastri has, which has really made him stand out this year.
Absolutely, I do agree. And what we saw here, him against Leclerc, as you said, fantastic. And funnily enough, Leclerc's just gone second quickest by just 0.04 of a second, but Verstappen is 0.09 behind. I'm astonished. I mean, looking at the times this year, Becca, you know, because we're into this final year of the technology of these cars, but I'm still astonished. These cars are all manufactured, you know, by different groups around the world, a lot in the UK but elsewhere, and yes, some of the power units are shared, but the difference in times we are seeing now is just remarkable, isn't it?
It's amazing. We've had these regulations in place for a few years, so the gap does naturally start to close, although McLaren obviously came out of the blocks far ahead of everyone else. But we're seeing that kind of the rest of them, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, they are so close to each other in the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari have had an okay season, not great by any stretch of anyone's imagination, have not won a race yet this season, and they are second. So, you know, Red Bull, okay, don't really have a second driver picking up points at all, so that's a bit tricky. Antonelli has had, I think it's fair to say, probably a terrible season. He only scored 3 points across the 9 European races, so that's why Toto Wolff described him as underwhelming after Monza. But they are so close, even with those things in play. We are talking hundredths of a second apart, thousands of seconds apart even. And isn't that the great thing about Formula One? This track is 6 kilometres long, and they get separated by less than the blink of an eye. This is one of the reasons you love this sport.
Yeah, now talking about Oscar Piastri, as we were a minute ago, it's worth pointing out that if you remember, there was a radio message early on in the session calling him back into the pits. They had to do something. Well, he's still in the pits and his engine covers off and he's out of the car. So it looks like that car's got some kind of problem. He's got no time, so not what Oscar Piastri needs in his first session.
No, that's a bit tricky. Lando Norris, meanwhile, is going even quicker now. So, Russell's just gone fastest. I think it's about to go back to Norris. Yes, it does. That was a good lap by Lando. As I say, though, the track is getting cleaner and cleaner all the time. But Russell, as you said, Mercedes are one of those top teams in terms of pace. We have a red flag. Session stopped. So something happened. We haven't yet seen exactly what has caused this red flag, but the session is being stopped now. It could be just some debris out on the circuit. There are parts out on the track, and it may just be time to go and pick them up.
There's a piece of carbon out in the last corner.
Pierre Gasly just telling us that, telling his team, but telling everybody, yeah. So there are some bits and pieces that need picking up, which is fair enough. It'll only take a few moments that the session will be red flagged, and then it'll be back underway again. And there's no doubt that issues here at Baku, like safety cars, virtual safety cars, are a common part of the races here, because incidents can always happen, and those safety car periods, of course, make a huge difference if you're making a late pit stop. Actually, Lando Norris last year, although he failed to get out of Q1, he did a really good job in the race. He started on the hard tyres. They sort of hoped that there would be a safety car late in the race. There wasn't, so he didn't gain from that. But he did help Piastri, actually, funnily enough, because he held off Perez, who had made an early pit stop and was a threat. but because he held him off when Piastri came out, having taken that lead from Leclerc earlier on, he was still in the top spot and went on to take the win, of course. Kimi Antonelli's car just being pushed back into the pits. All the cars having to come back into the pits right now as we have this red flag, as they want to try and clear the track out just a little bit. It is Lando Norris currently fastest from George Russell. Charles Leclerc is currently third, Max Verstappen fourth, and Tsunoda, for once, Yuki Tsunoda, who we know a bit under pressure now that we have heard pretty much that he is not going to be driving for Red Bull next year. He's actually not too far behind Verstappen. He's fifth. Lewis Hamilton currently sixth. Isaac Hadjar, the man who, Isaac Hadjar, as we're going to be calling him a bit more now, the Frenchman, he is definitely doing well. He's going to be going to Red Bull next year. He's seventh fastest. Alex Albon for Williams in eighth, and Williams went well here last year. Nico Hülkenberg ninth, and Esteban Ocon is, he's in 10th place at the moment. Listen to Russell.
Serious amount of bottoming in the straight. Copy that.
And you could hear his voice.
Doesn't sound good.
Terrible.
Yeah.
We know he hadn't been very well, feeling well yesterday, and his voice sounding not. No wonder he couldn't do the media stuff. He didn't want to be talking, did he?
Someone should tell him that his hospitality suite does the best ginger and lemon hot tea ever. That's what he needs, isn't it?
Now, the bit that they're ripping off there, Andrew, is actually, that's something that's in the...
Yeah, it's a bit of rubber, isn't it, under the curb or between the curb and the track. I don't quite know.
That's not from a car.
No, definitely not. They need to... There's a guy in orange and Marshall trying to yank it out, but it looks to me like they need a pair of scissors or something there, Beck.
He needs a bit of help.
Bit of haberdashery on that bit of rubber there.
Yeah. So,
he's not getting that out on his own, is he?
No.
So Marshall trying...
Despite all the people behind the fences cheering him on.
Yes, Marshall trying to clear the track. He can't quite do it yet under this red flag period in this first practice session. Oh, he's managed to get it out now. Oh, he has. He had to pull hard, and he's getting a cheer now from the crowd, which is rather lovely. So that was fun to see. We did see Carlos Sainz running wide over the curb there, but whether that released the rubber strip that was underneath, I don't know. Yeah, it did. We got another view of it. So that did release a rubber strip, which has now been pulled out. I would think this session will be back underway soon. Just looking at a replay of George Russell going through. He was reporting the underneath of the car, and we definitely got some shots of it hitting the floor.
Yeah, it's always the compromise. With these ground effect cars, they want to run them as low as possible, pretty much. They can get too low. But basically, there's more performance the lower you get the car to the ground. So teams often start at the lowest end of the setup, if you like, or what they think will be the lowest end of the setup, and then they might run into problems, whether it's too much bottoming like you've got there, or you might be and that leads to wearing the plank out too much. This is the problem that Ferrari have basically had all year, that their car it wants to run to be at a competitive performance level. It needs to run too low effectively, and it means that the plank wears out too much, and they end up getting disqualified like they did in China. And this is what happened to them in Hungary. You remember when Charles Leclerc put it on pole, Ben, and then he was competing for the win, or appeared to be competing for the win, with Oscar Piastri for the first two stints, and then his pace just dropped off a cliff in the final stint. And what happened there basically was that Ferrari had to raise the car to stop it hitting the track so much.
I remember, yeah.
And they do that through two different ways. By increasing the tyre pressures for the final stint, so that obviously lifts the car up because the tyres become more balloon-like, and also through lift and coast. So they were limiting the speed profile on the car. Interestingly, what they did in Hungary, it obviously varies from track to track. They set an upper speed limit of 280 kilometres an hour. And when they got to that level, the drivers weren't allowed to go any faster on the straight, because obviously the faster you go on the straight, the more downforce is on the car, the lower it pushes to the ground, the more the plank hits the ground.
And that's something you've got to watch here, because the speed at the end of the straight here is very high, isn't it?
That's exactly the point I was coming to, yes, in a roundabout way, with George Russell's Mercedes grounding out like that.
No, but that's really useful. The track is, in theory, open, although we've got somebody jumping up and down on the curb.
The most high-tech sports in the world, and we are using gravity and body weight to try and fix
it's
curb.
Movement in the curb, look, and that, it's odd. We've got on yellow flag, so the track is in theory open, but
we have a person on the track. That's dangerous.
Yeah, but it's obviously somebody who understands what matters with the circuit, and there is a bit of movement on that curb, and I wonder, are they going to... I mean, they haven't brought a red flag out again. It may be something they want to do between the sessions.
Well, the rubber that we were talking about was a thin strip of rubber, which is obviously between the bottom of the curb and the track, which must be giving the curb some kind of sort of cushioning, some kind of suspension on the curb, if you like, which I didn't realise existed, but obviously it is. And that's obviously come out. So now, presumably, there's a gap between the curb and the track, which is why there'll be some play in the curb. Now, the problem that they've got is that Formula One cars
they do use that
so many forces.
Yeah.
They're so high in terms of G and so on with the downforce and the speed that they're going at. So it might be that they're concerned that with that extra play in the curb, it's just going to make that curb more vulnerable to being torn up, and then they really would have a problem.
I agree. If that curb get ripped off, and it is a curb that we do see the cars coming, because that's coming out of turn 16, which is onto the main straight. Yeah, there are some curves, but it's absolutely flat out after that, isn't it?
Well, this is a street circuit, so unlike a temporary circuit, they have to affix these curves to the road somehow. So I'm guessing this is their decision that they've come up with, their best decision, to use the rubber to fix it to the road, and then it obviously can be removed. But also remembering that it was here that George Russell went over the drain cover. And so you talking about the forces, right, Andrew, these cars, and we saw it with Carlos Sainz in Vegas as well, these cars create so much downforce that as soon as you go over it, it just rips up anything underneath it that's not, almost concreted down, which is what they ended up doing with the drain cover in Vegas. So they have to be so careful, because thank goodness that incident in Vegas in particular with Carlos Sainz wasn't more serious, but it had the potential to be.
Yeah, so the person this is good news for, in a negative way, if you like, is Oscar Piastri, who, of course, as we know, is stranded in the pits with some kind of problem. Well, I've been in touch with McLaren, and they tell me they're investigating an issue with the power unit. So that's why the engine cover's off. So that could put him out for the session. So the more of the session that doesn't run for the other drivers, the better that is for the championship leader, of course. Yeah,
that is true. But, and of course, as I say, the track does develop as we go through the weekend. It's better for this to happen in FP1 than it is in FP2 or in qualifying.
Well, this is exactly when you want there to be an issue if you're going to have an issue over the weekend. Oscar Piastri hasn't had a mechanical failure since Austin 2023.
That's right. He's finished every race,
He's finished every single race. I think he's second in the standings now, or third, in the standings behind Hamilton and Verstappen for most race finishes consecutively. So is he due one? We obviously saw Zandvoort, his teammate Lando Norris, had that explosion. They're saying it's chassis, although I still don't really understand that. Looked like the engine, but he's due one, maybe, is he? I mean, let's be honest, as a neutral, and we often get accused of British bias, but as a neutral, it does make the championship more interesting, doesn't it? And I'm not wishing ill on him, by the way, to be clear, but it's very interesting that this is happening. And then we have to get into papaya rules, because I was having this conversation on the podcast that I host, saying, well, what does fair mean?
Nice
You're welcome, I know. I didn't name it, though.
You can.
Okay, well, on Inside the Piranha Club, producer Joe's going to kill me. We were talking about this because we were saying that if you swap back the places after a slow pit stop, which is part of racing, Lando Norris's car fails in Zandvoort, well, does Piastri have to pull over to keep it fair? Like, where does this end?
Well, I think we saw the extent of it in Monza, and I think there's two levels to this, aren't there? I think, if you just take a step back and look at it on a fairness level, the decision makes sense, in the sense that they were running 2-3 with Norris ahead. Piastri was not as quick as Norris. He didn't deserve to be second, as he said himself. And McLaren chose to stop the cars in the order they did for their reasons. Now, we can come on to the reasons and whether they were right or not, or whether they needed to do it in a minute, but they chose to do that as a team. It was the wrong way round. Really, the lead driver should get priority. They didn't do it that way round. They gave Piastri priority for their own reasons. And the end result of that was the cars ended up inverted. So on a fairness level, it makes absolute sense to say, we messed up, we created this scenario, it's not fair on Lando, as they would refer to him.
Because that's his name.
Yes, as opposed to Norris, which I should say as a journalist. Anyway, and therefore it's up to us, it's our responsibility to put things back the way they were before we started messing around, effectively.
But that's a lot of given we heard the radio message about the fact that they said to Norris, do you want to come in? And he said, no, I'll go second as long as he doesn't undercut me.
Yeah, do you want to stop the other car first? Yeah.
Norris made the call. That wasn't a team decision. He said stop Piastri first to cover off Leclerc, and I understand that, but let's be honest, Leclerc was a decent 3-4 seconds behind, so didn't really need covering off. Also didn't have the pace of the McLaren. So I don't really buy into that argument. Norris made that decision. Norris then suffered a slow pit stop. This is sport.
So I think Andrea Stella, the team principal, would say that Norris didn't make the decision. He would say they consulted him and the team made the decision to do the drives.
Consulting is such a get-out, isn't it?
I do agree with you that the Leclerc... because tried to get a clear answer from this on Stella twice after the race in Monza. Anyone who's heard the podcast, I'm repeating myself, but obviously not everyone will have heard the podcast, presumably. They said they were covering Leclerc with Piastri. They were worried about the undercut. Now, he was 4 seconds behind. He's nowhere near close enough to undercut unless Piastri has a problem. So I think they didn't need to overcomplicate it in my mind. They could have just stopped them in Norris-Piastri order. But I think that wasn't the real reason. I think the real reason was Norris was worried about a safety car. So they'd gone along in the hope of a safety car happening and that giving them the chance to beat Verstappen to the win. So they're thinking safety car, safety car, safety car. Norris knows that if he stops first and then there's a safety car in the one lap before Piastri stops, that will give Piastri the position, and that's the end of that. He can't get it back. So I think that's the thinking. What I don't understand is why they didn't just say that.
But, okay, I understand the safety car argument. It's Monza. There is a high proportion of races which have a safety car. But you can only race what's in front of you. And so constantly chasing down the idea that there may be a safety car gets you into even more of a pickle than they were already in.
That's what I mean by overcomplicating it. I think at that point it would have made more sense just to stop them in the right order and just... If the safety car happens, then that's just bad luck, you know. That's what I mean by they're thinking too many steps down the line. Almost, but that's their job, I guess.
Will this get more straightforward when they have won the Constructors' Championship? In terms of, we all know that the money is in the Constructors' Championship. All the prize money, it's all dictated. Everyone's bonuses, it's all done off the order of the Constructors' Championships. McLaren are probably going to get that this weekend, let's be honest. They only need to outscore Ferrari by 9 points, and then and Oscar Piastri is getting back in the car.
Yeah, it's good to see that Oscar Piastri is getting back into his McLaren after, as you said, there was an issue. We haven't heard cars out on track, and yet we're not under red flag at the moment. The clock is ticking away. We've got just over half an hour to go. We've got yellow flag, track hazard still out on. So there's a cat in the pits at the moment.
Cat Hadjar.
Or in the paddock, rather. That's rather sweet.
He was there all day yesterday, and they had to get someone to come and remove him, but clearly he is very fond of it. We have actually, I think, from memory, had an incident of a cat on track. Thankfully, the cars weren't on track. I'm a cat person, I confess. Don't at me if you're a dog person. But he's gorgeous. Oh, are you? Okay. Well, it's a beautiful Bengal. If you've not seen the images yet, I think it's a Bengal cat. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
But yes, it's been doing the rounds, and if you go onto any form of social media, all of the teams and F1 themselves have been getting into the pictures, and I think probably the highest engagement they've had is the pictures of the cat.
So there's some weirdness going on track. As you said, Ben, the cars aren't coming out.
I can't believe you've not picked up off the cat chat.
I'm just so uninterested in the cat chat.
You're not a pet person, are you, Benny?
That's not... Well, I don't think anyone needs to know about my personal life on that level, Beck. I wouldn't agree with that necessarily, by the way. But anyway, let's not get dragged down that cul-de-sac. So they're not out on track, even though the pit lane is open and they can go out on track. Now they might be because they've got a yellow track. They've got a yellow flag track hazard in sector 17, which I think is that corner where the curb was, but it keeps going yellow, green, yellow, green, yellow, green on the screens, and I don't really know what's going on there. And it would be nice of the FIA to tell us what's going on, but communication is not their strong point quite a lot of the time. So
in the meantime, can we name the paddock cat? Should people send in their suggestions?
Yeah, good idea. Yeah,
that's a nice idea.
BBC F1, everybody.
Hashtag BBC F1, send in your cat names. Cat Hadjar. I'm not claiming it as my own. I stole it, but I like it. That gives you a flavour for it. Social media.
Which social media then?
I don't know. Everyone was on this yesterday.
Oh, that's fun. Well, we're just looking down into the pits at the moment. Charles Leclerc just sitting in the car, waiting to come back out. Of course, star qualifier here at Baku. And he got the second place last year, but he still has not had the victory here. And we've seen George Russell, of course, out there doing a good job, second fastest, but touching the ground a little bit more than he might have liked. Leclerc currently third, Russell second, and the fastest at this stage, Lando Norris on a 1:43.7. Remember, though, it is Charles Leclerc who has the various lap records here from his in the past as well. He's had the lap record at 1:43.009, his qualifying record at 1:40.203. So we're seeing 1:43s at the moment, but as we go into qualifying, we will be getting lower and lower down into the low 140s. One of the aspects this weekend as well is that Pirelli have brought the softest tyres that are in the mix over the course of the season. They can choose which, so when we say soft, medium, hard, they can be different levels of softness at the different circuits. They've gone for the softest, so C6. Now the C6 has been a relatively new soft tyres, what everybody's been out on so far today, but it's not always proven to be the best tyre in qualifying. Interestingly, we saw George Russell earlier this year not use the C6, put his C5 on and actually put in a mega lap. But they have to be a little wary. They have far more of the soft tyres than they do of the mediums and hards. They're limited in the number of sets of tyres they get. And that's something we'll think about over the rest of the weekend. It's not so significant yet, but when we get into qualifying, I do think there may be a mix as to who goes for the soft tyre, who goes for the medium compound tyre, but they've got to be careful about what they've got left for the race as well. So that's something we will be looking into. Right now, as I say, though, we have seen some impressive performances. Liam Lawson fastest on the straights, George Russell second fastest, Alex Albon third fastest. The Williams has shown good pace here in the past, as we mentioned. Last year they had both drivers get into the points, with Colapinto doing the race for Williams, but Alex Albon did actually, although he qualified behind him, did actually finish ahead of him. But to have both of the Williams scoring in the points, and to be fair to Alex Albon, I mean, he's been doing a really, really good job in recent times, scoring regular points. And the fact that Williams are now fifth in the Constructors' Championship, that's impressive. But yeah, we've still got the clock ticking away. We've got marshals out on the circuit in all sorts of places. There's no chance that anybody can go out there, really. I don't really understand this session very well.
Why aren't we red flagged?
Yeah, I don't understand that.
We were red flagged, and then with a marshal on track jumping on the curb, they then put it under yellow flag track hazard. So it's all well and good Oscar Piastri getting back into his McLaren, but he's certainly not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange session, this one. The fans are all enjoying themselves, sitting on the seats, and it's a lovely weather, but they're not getting to see much.
They look as perplexed as we do, don't we?
Yeah.
So this is a strange one. And I mean, it's not one or two people on track. It seems like every single marshal, particularly within the castle section, the shot we've just seen, there's loads of them. So is the session going to get restarted? I mean, 27 minutes, you can easily get people off track. There's still plenty of time, just under half an hour to go. But yeah, a very, very odd one. We have our first suggestion for the Paddock Cat.
Go on then.
And I like it. From Actually Bionic Man, Paddy.
Fair enough.
I like it. We have a producer called Paddy, so
we do indeed.
We could name it after our producer too.
Yeah, we could. That could be a good name. Just looking at the Constructors' Championship points at the moment, it is possible McLaren could become Constructors' Champions again this weekend. It does depend a little bit, of course, on how Ferrari do. Ferrari are currently second, but if they gain 9 points on Ferrari, and that is a question, because of course Charles Leclerc is always so quick here that if Leclerc ends up winning or getting a podium, then perhaps they won't gain the 9 points they need on Ferrari. But there is a good chance that McLaren could to wrap up the Constructors' title. And remember, McLaren took the lead in the Constructors' title, funnily enough, here at Baku last year, and then went on to win the Constructors' title for their first time in many, many years. Well, this year, we could see them get a back-to-back Constructors' title since they got 4 Constructors' titles in a row, 1988 to 1991. Quite a while ago, but McLaren, of course, are the dominant team in terms of performance, both at the end of last year, getting the Constructors' Championship, not the Drivers' Championship, but this year on target for both the Constructors' Championship and the Drivers. It's just we don't know which driver.
In terms of the number of races left, they would be the first team to ever win it with 7 still remaining. But Benny was data geeking me earlier, weren't you, Benny? It's not the highest percentage of races left. So it's the most, in terms of number, it's the most, but in terms of percentage, it's not.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm getting a bit distracted trying to find out what on earth's going on with the track, but it does seem to be something to do with the curb. But it's a bit weird that the thing I really don't understand is why it's green flag conditions, but marshals are wandering around on the track.
Yeah, I've never really seen that before.
Why haven't they red flagged it? And I've asked the FIA, but of course they haven't come back to me.
That's how distracted you were. We just said that.
Yeah, they're very not good at communicating to the media, which is a shame because that's their job. Anyway, on the Constructors' Championship, yes, in terms of the number of races left, this will be the earliest that anyone's ever done it. But in terms of percentage, it's not the earliest. So in 1988, for example, we think McLaren won it at the Belgian Grand Prix when there were 5 races left, but there were only 16 Grand Prix then, and that was 31.25% of the season remaining, whereas if McLaren win it on Sunday, it'll be 29.16% of the season remaining.
I told you he geeked out on it.
It's clever. That is clever. But I mean, McLaren might well do it here, and that seems remarkable to me. It might not be the earliest in percentage in terms of a season, but if they can get it done this weekend, that is remarkable. And of course, they are comfortable there. The great thing about it is it really is between the two drivers now, between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, as to who's going to win the Drivers' Championship. I mean, I know Verstappen did a mighty job last time out in Monza, and actually just looking at what Red Bull are doing already this weekend, I think the car's looking good here again. Is there any chance that Matt could still close that gap up? That's demanding, but it's not impossible, is it?
It's not impossible. He's 94 points behind Piastri in the Drivers' Championship, so I think we can safely rule him out of that. I think you're right, it is between the two McLaren drivers. I found the language used after Monza by the Red Bull team really interesting. So Verstappen and Mekies, the team principal, both downplayed. They said it was very track-specific, which we know they run very track-specific within Monza because of the high speeds, the lower downforce.
Monza is a bit of a one-off.
It's a bit of a one-off.
Yeah.
However, Helmut Marko came out and said that it was a rebirth. That was his word. And he said, this would be basically the start of them going on. This track in Baku doesn't particularly suit them, really. We'll go to Singapore and see how they get on there, maybe. But I think it's really, the three of them all then agreed that this different approach that they're taking, that we spoke about earlier, more driver feedback, less so reliant on the data, kind of listening to who's in the car a bit more, has really paid off. And I think it also adds to this trend that we're seeing at the moment of engineers becoming the bosses now. And it's, we all know F1 is a massive technological, engineering, mechanical feat. And it's some of the cleverest people in the world work in this sport. We know that. And so we've kind of, in the last maybe decade or so, maybe even 20 years, we've had marketeers, those kind of people at the top of the job. You look at Zach Brown, you look at Toto Wolff, you look at Christian Horner. And then suddenly we're seeing the likes of Laura Mekies, we're seeing Andrea Sella, a former engineer, Alan Permain, a former engineer. We are definitely seeing a transition to this way of thinking and these people being in charge. And obviously we're coming into a huge regulation change next season, probably the biggest that we've really seen, because it's chassis and engine. Normally we just have one or the other. So it'll be really fascinating to see how they're managing it. And I think with Stella, because he's a former engineer, it wasn't really clear how he would, adapt with the culture, or if he would be a people person. But my goodness, is he a people person? When you speak to him, he speaks so clearly. He can explain the most complicated things in the most straightforward way. Between him and Zach Brown, they have absolutely formed this culture where everyone is buying into what they are doing, because they are all seeing the results out on track. You can see the uptick in their performance correlates with when Stella started. I actually did a Q&A with Zach Brown in January, and he told me that he'd tried to hire Andrea Stella back in 2020, and actually at the time it was my brain has gone. Sorry. He's went to Audi, and then Benny, help me out here. The former team principal at McLaren before Andrea Silla was
Andreas Seidel.
Seidel. I was about to say Schmidt. Seidel. So actually, before Seidel got the job, Zach Brown said that he had tried to give it to Stella, and Stella said, "No, I'm not ready." And so it's really interesting how they've created it, and I think that's also one of the reasons that we are seeing it stay so cordial. Perhaps not necessarily always on track, and we hear the radio messages. But certainly externally, we're not really getting a sense of any friction yet. It's all very calm. Everyone is working for the team. And let's be honest, this might be their only shot at the Drivers' Championship. We don't know what the cars are going to perform like next year. So it's unbelievable the job they've done as the cars now line up to get ready to go out again.
Yeah, Andrew, what's going on here?
Well, I can't be 100% sure, but the FIA's communications has not been good as usual. But I think I've just been told by a team that it was red, even though the timing screens were not saying it was red. So I don't know whether but somewhere in the issue of external communication with the timing screens, what we're seeing, there's some kind of problem, and the FIA were not telling us what the issue was, and they're still not being clear about the problem. They just say there's an issue with the curb at turn 16. Well, we know that, so the teams, as far as the teams were aware, the session was red flagged. It's just we didn't know that, so that's what's going on. And it looks like Oscar Piastri's problem is, let me just read the McLaren thing. They've identified a PU issue, which we believe we've rectified. Now they're planning to get Oscar back out when we get going again. So it looks like Oscar Piastri gets the rest of this session, and he's not lost out too badly as a result of that issue. So, as usual, FIA not telling us what's going on properly, but the issue was the curb at turn 16, and it was red.
OK, thank you, Andrew. Well, we have just under 20 minutes to go in the first practice session here at Baku. Let me just run you through the order as it is now. This may well change in the next 20 minutes, but it is Lando Norris who is fastest, George Russell in second place, Charles Leclerc in third, Max Verstappen is in fourth, and then his teammate Yuki Tsunoda is in fifth place. Lewis Hamilton, former winner here, in sixth place. Isaac Hadjar seventh, Alex Albon eighth, Nico Hulkenberg is ninth for Sauber, and then Esteban Ocon and Ollie Behrman. So the two Haas cars are showing good pace at this stage. Carlos Sainz is 12th. We're just having a little look of Gabriel Bortoleto, a replay of Bortoleto coming out of the pits a moment and then going into turn 2 and having to run down the escape road. Although he didn't have to go all the way down the escape road, he was still able to turn in eventually, having stopped. But yeah, that's not the first time he's been down one of the escape roads today. Bortoleto is behind Lawson. Lawson is currently 13th, Bortoleto 14th. Then Kimi Antonelli is in 15th place, Pierre Gasly 16th, Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso. The two Aston Martins have not done anything special yet. They're down in 17th, 18th. Colapinto's in 19th, and Oscar Piastri not setting a time. Actually, Colapinto hasn't set a time yet either, but Piastri is back out now that hopefully that delay, and as Andrew was saying, this in a way is an advantage for Piastri because he hasn't lost as many laps as he would have done if this session had continued as normal. They're all trying to find a bit of space from each other now as they're going to go on to an outlap. So as they come down the hill from turn 15 into turn 16, where the curb situation was, which delayed it for a while, they are now picking up the speed but trying to find some clear area. Andrea Stella, we were talking about, team principal of McLaren, he's keeping a close eye on everything that's going on right now, and temperatures are much the same. We've seen the temperature just come up a couple of degrees on the surface, but we will see this track getting quicker and quicker. A 1:43.7 is the fastest time so far that has been set by Lando Norris, and we're riding on board McLaren right now as it comes down towards the end of the straight and into the first corner. In fact, we're on board with Piastri. Norris is just up ahead of him, and we will see whether this is going to work for Piastri now into turn 2. Of course, he just wants to know that everything is reliable and whether he's going to be pushing absolutely flat out yet, or whether he just wants to make sure that whatever work they've done on this car while it was in the pits is now going to come together. Looking neat and tidy so far. He's going for it, but he's not going crazy yet. He's not pushing it right out to the barriers, although actually there he's looking pretty good. Let's just see what this first sector is like. And he's just half second down on the fastest first sector that has been set by Lando Norris at this stage. There are so many barriers that are so easy to clip here at Baku, aren't there? You've got to be cautious, especially through the tight section as he goes up the hill now. It's a heart and mouth track, isn't it? There are so many times when you're watching it where you think there's no possible way at those speeds they can be getting that close to the wall. So it's incredibly impressive. And actually, I always think that's what makes it so impressive with Charles Leclerc having had the last 4 pole positions here. He just has such a feel for it, doesn't it? It's so impressive. And actually, I joke with Benny because Benny thinks Leclerc's the quickest over one lap, his Mr. Saturday. Oh, you're changing your mind now, are you, Benny?
I don't think I've ever said definitively that he's the quickest. I said that many people think he is, and there's a strong argument that he could.
Oh, you're such a diplomat. But it's an incredibly impressive track. A bit like Singapore, actually. Remember the 2018 lap that Hamilton put in Singapore? It's one of those tracks where you're just constantly thinking any single misjudgment by millimetres we're talking about here, not even centimetres sometimes. Yeah. It is so impressive what these guys can do.
What I will say about Leclerc is that Max Verstappen was asked recently to name his best drivers at various aspects of racing, not including himself, and he put Leclerc up there as his best qualifier.
Piastri's just done his first time lap and he's gone up into the top 10. Lewis Hamilton's just improved up to 7th, so Piastri in 10th place. Let's see what Verstappen's doing. He is currently 5th, but he's actually on an improving lap here. He's improved his own sector times. Whether it's going to be quite as quick as what Norris did earlier, let's have a look. Nearly 0.043 of a second. He is second to Lando Norris, and the Red Bull is, I have to say, a bit like Monza, is looking impressive. Sometimes on a Friday, I've noticed this year that the Red Bull doesn't shine on a Friday and then it can shine on a Saturday. I'll tell you what, it's shining right now.
Yeah, do you know what the funny thing is about Red Bulls on a Friday? I think by default... Oh, Hadjar Radio?
Yeah, I don't know what the hell he's doing. He's just so annoying. It's just on purpose all the time, so yeah.
Oh, I didn't see who that was on his right-hand side. Seemed to be blocking the racing line there. I think we'll probably get another replay of that. Yes, so often I think by default Max Verstappen just likes to moan on a Friday about how bad the car is. And I have learned over the many years of covering the sport to mostly ignore what happens on a Friday because, as you say, this is just practice. But it is looking very quick. And actually, I have to note the Racing Bulls because Liam Lawson is in 5th and he actually has the quickest 3rd sector. So that is looking very fast as well.
That's impressive, isn't it? Yes, Liam Lawson. Liam Lawson is somebody who has to deliver now.
Oh, he is under an enormous amount of pressure, isn't he?
Massive pressure. He's really got to do it now because of these questions about Racing Bull's lineup for next year, whether Tsunoda will go back from Red Bull to Racing Bulls. Liam Lawson's going to think, I've got to do everything I can now.
Because Arvid Lindblad, who's part of that Red Bull program, junior program, he is right hot on the heels. He had an outing FP1 at Silverstone and he did impress there. He's young, he's 18 I think he is now, maybe 19 he is now. So he has got time on his side, but it does seem to be a fight for that Racing Bull between those 3 drivers of Lawson, Tsunoda and Lindblad. Do you give Lawson another chance, given how brutal Red Bull were to him at the start of the season? Just 2 races in the top team. I mean, let's be honest, this is Red Bull. They're not kind to anyone. And it's a business at the end of the day, and they want the best drivers, as Benny was saying earlier. It's about, finding the next Max Verstappen if you can. So, yes, Lawson is under an immense amount of pressure, but it does feel like his confidence is starting to come back to him. Yeah. And actually, he has been impressive in the last few races.
He has, yeah. He finished 8th in Belgium, he finished 8th in Hungary as well. Did have that contact with Sainz in Zandvoort, and Monza didn't go quite so well for them. But, no, interesting to see how that goes. With Lawson currently 5th fastest. Lando Norris out on track again. We'll see whether the Aston Martins improve. And Alex Albon also he's already done a very good lap, actually, Alex Albon. He is 7th fastest. In fact, he's heading back in, I think, now. But we are now just having an eye on Alonso as he comes out of turn 15. Just stays off the barrier there. Always very impressive. He's had good results. Actually, Aston Martin generally, Andrew, have done okay in the past, haven't they?
Well, they've got a draggy car this year, so they were terrible at Spa, for example. They were qualified on the back of the grid, so they were expecting to have a really bad weekend in Monza. In the end, they did have a bad weekend, but only because Alonso's suspension failed after about 20 laps. Until then, he'd been extremely impressive, put it in the top 10, and was on course for 6th or 7th place in the race, which was a lot better than they expected going into Monza. So on the basis of that, you would expect him theoretically to be able to be in that similar position here. Plus, he's also a guy, a bit like Leclerc, who's very good at these street circuits. The acrobaticness of the, if that's a word, of the driving style, and he's great at Singapore, for example, Fernando Alonso. And let's not forget 2017 Baku, when he came back to the pits with half a car and still managed to finish 7th with it after the first lap. Sorry, 7th at the end of the race, half a car at the end of the first lap.
He's still amazing, isn't he, Benny?
Shut up. Lando Norris has just done a stunning lap. He's done a 1:42.7 which is over a second faster than Max Verstappen. And Piastri's just done a better lap, but he's still a second down. So I tell you what, Lando Norris is really on it right now.
Where did he pull that from?
I don't know.
It was from start to finish. He's now it was purple, purple, purple. That was incredibly impressive from Norris then. I just said that we don't read too much into Fridays, but he'll be taking a lot from that lap.
He will, and he was a bit unfortunate last year with what happened in qualifying, but he did a great job in the race. But he hasn't had a podium here yet, but I have to say he's doing a great job at the moment. Lando Norris fastest by over a second from Max Verstappen. Piastri is third, virtually the same time as Verstappen. We have just under 11 minutes to go in first practice. George Russell is currently fourth, but his teammate we're listening to right now is Kimi Antonelli, the youngster who got a little bit of criticism after the race in Monza, but I do think that he's also shown some talent. It's just the recent races haven't quite come together for him in quite the same way. But there's no doubt, he's had a podium already this year, and I'm sure he's going to be part of Mercedes next year with, as you were saying, a very revised car with revised power unit. I think he's still a potential star for the future.
He's only 19, and there's no doubt that he's having Hamilton radio.
Clip the wall. Puncture. Yeah, puncture. Yeah, front wing, I think so.
Lewis making a mistake. Lewis Hamilton not often makes mistakes, but he's having a bit of a tough year this year. Carry on.
Seems to be making more of them this year, doesn't he?
Yeah. But Antonelli.
So, yeah, Antonelli is an interesting one because he was... Mercedes are waxing lyrical about him, and we all expected him, from how they were talking, that he would come in and just blow us all away, almost Hamilton-esque 2007. That certainly hasn't been the case. He had that big crash in Monza last year on his debut, obviously, and almost to bolster his confidence, they announced him as their driver that weekend. And he had the podium in Canada, and we all sort of, the start of the season, we all thought, start of the European season, sorry, we all thought that would kind of propel him forward, and it was a great race from him, and he deserved the podium. But 3 points from the 9 European races is not what you would expect. Yeah. And for Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team principal, to turn around after Monza and to say that he had been underwhelming, I can't actually remember the last time I heard Wolff digging out one of his drivers like that. Antonelli was talking about it yesterday in Baku, saying, I just use it as fuel to propel me forward. We've spoken since, it is what it is. But it wasn't quite the kind of punchiness I was expecting from Antonelli to say, well, that's what the boss can say what he likes, I know what I'm doing, I'm performing. And I don't know, he didn't quite come out as fighting as I had expected him to. He's only 19, he has got time on his side. Here's the Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, we're just getting a replay of Lewis clipping the left front wing. He just clipped on the inner barrier, didn't he?
That's not a mistake it's not a mistake racing drivers like to make.
Turn 5.
Clipping the inside wall, Ben, as you know, is probably about the worst.
It's unusual.
Yeah.
It's usually the outer wall that they tend to clip things, but that is unusual, and especially for somebody of Lewis's talent, that is a bit of a strange one.
He's left some debris on the track as well there.
Yeah. But he obviously got a better turn-in than he was expecting. He was maybe expecting a little less turn-in on the front end, but it turned in very efficiently, and it just clipped the front wing. He's back in the pits. They can get that sorted. There are still just under 8 minutes to go. It wouldn't take very long to get him back out if necessary. Lando's still fastest. Leclerc's got a little closer to half a second. Russell is 0.7 of a second down in third. Albon has moved up to fourth, so that Williams is again working very, very well here. Maybe not being quite that high in qualifying, but it's a car that works well around this Baku circuit, as we saw last year. Even, of course, they've developed, and when we come back another year on, they can be very different, a bit like you were saying, Andrew, about the Aston Martin. That's a different car this year. Alonso is down in 13th place at the moment, and Stroll down in 15th. So I do wonder whether Aston Martin are going to be able to continue their run of always having a car in the top 6 in the finish here at Baku in the past, which is quite an impressive result for Aston in the past. But whether they're going to be able to do that this weekend, we shall wait and see. Fresh tyres being put on Lando Norris's car, so we could see a much faster time coming up any moment. All of them using the full soft tyres at this stage. No surprise there, as I say, particularly with this C6 tyre They will experiment a little bit more, I think, with the other tyres perhaps in FP2, partly because of the race length, but also from a qualifying point of view, there may be some questions as to whether it will be the medium or the soft that works best here. Hajar's just popped up to 7th. We're about to see Gabriel Bortoletto. Yeah, he's popped up too. He's gone into 10th place. Slowest at the moment, the two Alpines. Colapinto down in 19th place, some 3 seconds off the pace. And Gasly, 4 seconds off the pace. That seems a bit strange too, because Gasly has done 12 laps in this FP1. So I'm a little surprised he's that far down. I'm just having a little look at Albon a moment ago. Alex Albon, turn 15. Yeah, he did clip the curve, the barrier on the outside. That is a barrier we often see clipped. We're just getting another view of it now. And as he comes out of turn 15, just touches it with the rear wheel, but it's a light touch. Won't have done damage, I don't think. We do see accidents there sometimes, but just a touch on the barrier there. That was okay. You get away with that. And Albon has been doing well. He is the 4th fastest at this stage. Max Verstappen back out on circuit. Max on his out lap, so he's now flat out as he goes through the very high speed curves on what is effectively the long straight here. It does go on for ages. It's 2.1 kilometers, 1.3 miles, and DRS and available. It does allow for some overtaking, so we're watching him through turn 1, out to the curb but not going too wide, into turn 2. Runs it out towards the barrier, but again, beautifully done. We'll keep an eye on the sector times. Cars keeping out of his way at this stage. And Max Verstappen looking to see if he can get down to the 1:42.7 that Lando Norris has set. His teammate has just done a decent lap himself. Yuki Tsunoda has gone 5th fast. He's actually gone quicker than what Verstappen's done so far, but I do think we're going to see Verstappen going a bit quicker this time.
Yeah, he is using every single inch of this. Oh, and he's gone green, so he is up on his previous time, but he is using every inch of this track at the moment, isn't he? That's good from Tsunoda. As we were talking about earlier, they're saying that he's under pressure. For him to be up in 5th, he won't be quicker than his teammate, than Verstappen, by the end of the weekend of that, I'm sure. But this is a good outing from Red Bull, and actually it does rather suggest that what Helmut Marko was saying, that it's a rebirth, I don't love that word, I apologise, I've used it again, is that it actually Red Bull have made big strides forward and that they are fighting in the Constructors' Championship. There's not much, as I said earlier, between big block up from Verstappen.
Yeah, into turn 15. I was just thinking, that is the corner that we mentioned, that you touch the barrier on the exit very easily, but it is one of the heaviest braking areas actually of the circuit, and one of the longest braking areas. It's only for a 2.7 second braking area, but it is absolutely crucial you get the braking right there into turn 15. He got it wrong, and that's a shame, because I think we would have seen him very close to what Lando Norris has done, but right now, with just 3.5 minutes to go, basically, he's down in 6th place, Max Verstappen, who ran deep into the escape road and had to back right off. Now Charles Leclerc is, a touch on the barrier there for Oscar Piastri as well, out of turn 15, the same corner that we've just seen Verstappen go straight on. He didn't go straight on, and he's kept the power on, but he definitely touched the barrier a little harder than Albon.
This is why the drivers love practice. What we're seeing now is them pushing and finding, because you were mentioning earlier, Ben, they're so close. We're talking hundreds of seconds between these teams. They have to find every millimetre of this track, and what we're seeing now, they've got fresh boots on, they're pushing as hard as they can because they're trying to find out where the limits are of these cars, of this track, to see what's happening. So it's absolutely fine to be making mistakes in FP1. You don't want them to be massive, catastrophic gearbox changes or all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, this is actually quite an exciting FP1.
It is good, and Piastri's just gone second, 0.3 of a second from his teammate Lando Norris. And we're just having a replay. You're listening to the replay of Max Verstappen getting the braking wrong into turn 15. He realised straight away, he locked up the left front, had to come off the brake, and that meant basically I have to go in a straight line. The escape road there is easy to go down, and he was sensible, didn't try and turn. Listen in.
My car is coming off the ground on the braking. So there's so much contact.
Yeah, and that's actually very interesting. So what he's telling the team is it was bottoming as he came in. That's what caused that left front to lock up, basically. Oscar Piastri, we've just seen a replay of him hitting that barrier, and it was definitely a harder hit. He actually had a touch of oversteer to the right rear that clipped the barrier. He didn't have to lift, and he did a good lap anyway. They will have to check the car, and that is something you have to be a bit wary of course. If you bash the barriers, the car can be fine initially, but sometimes that can cause damage later on.
That's interesting though, isn't it? Because Piastri, that's a decent chunk of time he lost there, and he still finished that lap second, 3/10 off. So actually he was on for a cracker there.
Yeah, possibly, although I don't think he lifted, so he would have lost a little bit, but probably not a lot. He thought, I'm just going for it anyway, even though I've clipped the barrier. George Russell, we're riding on board with George right now. He's still doing a good job. He is currently 4th fastest. This lap, it doesn't look any quicker at the moment. His first sector is no quicker than what he'd already done. But we will just keep an eye. Let's see how he gets on with, as he comes down to this turn 15, you go through a flat-out kink before you get there, 2 of them really, and then brake. And his braking's okay. He gets a bit of oversteer, but actually he's well away from the barrier. He's not being too risky at this stage. And he's actually done a personal best in the second sector. I think this lap time is going to be quite similar to what he's already done. He's done a 1:43.4 so far. Lando Norris with a 1:42.7. Looks as though he's going to end this session fastest unless we get the last couple of improvements on this next lap. George is one of those who is improving on the second sector. Let's just see where this puts him. George Russell across the line, and he stays in 4th place. That was a slightly better lap, 43.257. A thousandth of a second slower than Charles Leclerc, believe it or not, which is very, very close. So Leclerc's done a 1:43.256 and Russell a 1:43.257. Liam Lawson is currently in 9th place, and Isaac Hadjar in 10th. So both of the Racing Bulls are looking competitive, as we thought earlier on in this stage. They are both just a little behind the Red Bulls, but the Williams cars are both in the top 10. So Albon is currently 5th and Sainz is 8th. So this is a little bit like last year when both Williams did qualify in the top 10, when it was Franco Colapinto who was driving for Williams alongside Alex Albon. Well, now of course it's Albon and Sainz, and at this stage they are both in the top 10. The checkered flag is out after a rather strange first practice session where there was a long pause of a red flag where they were not allowed out on track, but the clock was ticking away. So actually, they've not done a huge number of laps. I think the most number of laps that we've seen, Lando's done 17 laps. A lot of them have done sort of 12, 13, 14 laps. We're just listening on Isaac Hadjar. Did he have to go down the escape road? Yes, he did. That was on the early part of the lap. Isaac Hadjar, but no damage. And that sometimes is just something you have to do. And we saw one of the Esteban Ocon going off down the escape road as well. So 1 or 2 drivers just on their last runs. But the checker flag is out. Nobody's on a mega lap right now. I think most actually are slowing down. What they will do is come back to the grid, I think, and do some practice starts. We are just looking at Lando Norris. Yeah, he's not on a mega lap, but he is going to complete the lap on the checker flag. And in the low-speed corners, the McLaren's definitely the fastest car, interestingly. Both Norris and Piastri being shown through the data that they have set the pace in the slowest laps, in the slowest corners rather, fastest laps, but slowest corners they have the fastest pace. Russell up there in 3rd and Leclerc 4th. And in terms of the sectors, it is Norris who has set the pace in sectors 1 and 2. But amazingly, Liam Lawson's fastest final sector. Now, bear in mind, the final sector is not just about corners, it's about straight line. It's about the drag you have in a straight line. So obviously the Racing Bulls have set a pretty low drag setup, haven't they?
Yeah, it looks like they've gone for that 2-kilometre stretch to see how they can, as we said earlier, that's the DRS zone, it's the big braking zone, it's a good place for overtaking, so they're clearly, that's what they're targeting and make up some places there.
Yeah, no,
it's an interesting test for them though, and it's clearly working.
It is working, yeah. So that's going to be very interesting because both of the Racing Bulls cars are in the top 10. Liam Lawson in 9th, Isaac Hadjar in 10th. And it looks like they've gone for a very low drag setup, which is working because they're getting very quick down that final sector, down that long straight across the start-finish line. Seeing a number of cars taking it fairly steady now. They will, I think, come onto the grid to do some practice starts, and that will be crucial. It's a tough start here at Baku in a way, in that it's a very short run. Even though you've got this very long straight, the grid is actually very close to turn 1. So it's one of the shorter runs of the season to get to the first corner. It can be very difficult to actually get past somebody into the first corner. Not impossible, we've seen it in the past, but if you get a reasonable start, you should be able to hold your position into the first corner. Charles Leclerc with those 4 consecutive pole positions in the last 4 years here at Baku, and third fastest currently in that first practice session. So we shall see whether he's going to be able to set the pace on Saturday when we get into qualifying itself. And I think what we're seeing right now is that, as expected, Leclerc's going to be competitive. McLaren's are looking very strong. The Red Bulls, though, are also looking competitive, because I think Max Verstappen's lap, when he then had to back out, he would have been up there. Whether he would have beaten Norris's time, I'm not sure, but he would have been up there with Norris and Piastri. So Max has won here in the past, once before, but he's never had a pole position here, interestingly. It's unusual, isn't it, for Max Verstappen to be missing out on a podium. Let's just quickly run through the list then. So Norris fastest, from Piastri second, Leclerc third, Russell fourth, Albon in 5th place, Tsunoda 6th, Verstappen ended up 7th, Sainz 8th, Lawson 9th, Hadjar in 10th place, Antonelli in 11th place, Hulkenberg 12th, Hamilton 13th, with a little bit of an incident damaging the front end, Bortoletto 14th, Alonso down in 15th, Behrman in 16th, Lance Stroll 17th ahead of Ocon, Colapinto, and Pierre Gasly setting the last performance at all. So we have the second practice coming on air at 12:55, 5-1 on Radio 5 Sports Extra 2, also available on BBC Sounds or on the BBC Sport website. This has been an IMG production for Radio 5 Live.